Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Korda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. During this series, we're going to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Youngstown. And joining me in today's show is Sister McManamon. Sister, it's such a pleasure to have you on Spotlight.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
You know, as always, we like to begin this special series on the anniversary of the diocese by talking about what anniversaries symbolize and why it's so important for us to celebrate those. In your own religious life, why are anniversaries important?
Well, I think it instills in all the members a rebirth of whatever kind, and I think also it's a major reminder of mission and transforming that mission according to the times you live in. So it has a giftedness in being celebrated and brings a lot of joy, a lot of fun, a lot of talent that you never saw before. So those things are all blessings, I think. And for a congregation, it's not what a parish might experience, but there is a renewal that happens in the members because of that digging and pulling and stretching, and so it's a good thing.
We know that the Humility of Mary Sisters have been here working in the diocese and ministering in the diocese for years. Tell us about the beginnings of them coming to the United States, and in particular to the Villa.
Well, my history on that is not going to be perfect, but I'm going to give you what is my 65 years of knowledge, and therefore the different times we've celebrated and brought things together. As most people begin to understand, we are of French origin, and so we came from Dommartin, France, in 1853, and so we were in the time of Napoleon. And Napoleon wasn't crazy about some of our tricks. So that meant Napoleon would have rather seen you out than in. And so Bégel, who was the priest that was a spiritual former and a partner to Mother Magdalene and Mother Anna, he worked out with them an opportunity to take the orphans they had and the few teachers that they had, get on a boat and get over here. When, of course, they came to Cleveland, or to what we now know as the Cleveland Diocese, the land that we eventually got, which is Villa Maria, Pennsylvania, and not Ohio, was a land that was owned by the Cleveland bishop. And Bishop Rapp really had if I could say it this way, if you know about Republicans and you know about Democrats, you would understand that if you were a Republican, you would want that Democrat as far away from you as possible. And that happened, and it was a good thing to happen. But we took up that villa farmland at a time when it had been inhabited by two communities before us. And they were flooded out every time. They just couldn't do it. But here come our little group of French lace makers who learned to farm that land and learned to walk from the villa to Youngstown once a week or so to get what was needed, to do what you had to do, because they had nothing. Right. They had no one and nothing. The history of that as it goes is we built the farm, we cured the meat, we did all of those things, meaning the sisters did it. Right. And so you grew up with an understanding of hard labor, but a sense of humor at all times, because it's going to kill you otherwise. Right. You just have to keep going with it. Now, the evolution happens when the smallpox happens in the whole group of men that were preparing the railroads. And in doing that work as railroad taskmasters, push them, many of them lost their lives. And so across the street from where the villa now stands is a cemetery, and you see the headstones of a lot of beautiful men and women who were part of that original band of people that we were in touch with. The issue that comes with that is they left their children behind, and therefore we took on the children as they went from babies to 1 year to 2 years, and they established that lovely school, which is long known as Villa Maria. It was Villa Maria Elementary in our language, but became Villa Maria High School as the kids pushed on up. And it was very attractive to Youngstown and surrounding areas, so there were dayers that came in as well as the children that lived there. That is a very important history of the beginning. It's important too because having a wish house that has a statue of Mary with one arm only carried over on the boat, because it was one of those relics that you had to have, but it was on the lands in relationship to those kids, in relationship to those families. And I think also there was a lot to be said about having a tea house open to the public right on the grounds, because the kids' families came as well as we came, and they built on that for a number of years until the bishop in Cleveland decided that they wanted our use in education. And I think our development in the educational field was you don't go out until you're educated. You don't teach those kids until you've been taught yourself. That's a great gift in the community, and I think it might be a trifle unique and makes a big difference in how we handle the classroom. So those are the beginnings that I'm very aware of. Sister Paulette Kirchensteiner's two aunts pretty much ran the farm and ran the whole idea of a smokehouse that would be valuable in taking these animals and preparing them for eating and all. But the interesting thing is that beautiful little smokehouse that they built has become the art house for the retreatants, and that's a powerful continuance. So.
Well, it's interesting. Many people in and around our diocese have experienced the art house, but has experienced Villa Maria and the community there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the community and about some of those special ministries that the Humility Mary Sisters are involved with, but we're going to take a quick break. So stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. Miles from the first Catholic parish in all of Ohio, in a place called Canton, Catholics gathered in 1817 to celebrate Mass with Father Fenwick. Because of limited building space, the Mass was held outdoors under a huge oak tree. The spot near the present Church of St. John the Baptist, which was established in 1823 as the second oldest parish in the Diocese of Youngstown. The oak tree grew there until 1906, when it was struck by lightning. To preserve it, the parishioners took the wood and carved a chair out of it, which remains in the church today. In 2012, St. John the Baptist was elevated to a basilica. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. The first Catholic parish, established in Portage County in 1831 near Randolph-Suffield, was St. Joseph Church. Years later, John Newman, who would become the first American male to be canonized, was sent there to give a mission to help heal the divisions that occurred between the German Catholics who had settled there. Perhaps that is what made him a saint. The parish is also noted for its school, which dates back to 1832, being the oldest English-speaking school west of the Alleghenies. The church is also famous for its Lourdes Shrine, which has welcomed pilgrims since 1927 and is the only exact replica of the world-famous grotto at Lourdes in France. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Sister Ann McManamon. You know, Sister, one of the wonderful things about religious communities is that they're involved in diocesan church. They're involved in our parishes, in our chanceries, in our educational and healthcare systems. So specifically share with us some of those ministries that you and your sisters have been involved with over the years here in the Diocese of Youngstown.
Tall order, but I'll try. I think probably the origins, speaking of the origins, and Cleveland being the receiver, so to speak, I think it's important to say that education in Cleveland became a must-do and will-do. And at the time, we were a diocesan community and became eventually a Vatican or a Vatican-type community. So we were, by design and the strictness of those early years, to go to Cleveland and then to go to Youngstown, which was part of Cleveland in those early years. So that all of that fit together. Right. It was easier to go to Youngstown because you were close. And so the development of the educational piece, because we had already developed it at the Villa, was an attractive thing. If you were in a diocese as a bishop and you were starting new parishes and so on, and having our sisters, I do always want to say that we have a balance. I've dealt with a lot of communities over the years, and I love the balance in our own community. I suppose it's what attracted me. But in that balance in the classroom, there's a lot more of a give and take and a patience, maybe, I hope, with self as well as with the kids. We began the Cleveland parishes of note and the Youngstown parishes, and I'm not elementary, so I'm going to risk saying that St. Edward's was always a first love, and St. Brendan's. That just was the nature of the Youngstown experience. And any time you went home and you had to stay in a convent overnight, you always stayed at St. Brendan's or St. Edward's and got to know all that they were doing. They moved into a junior high school, as you know, and that also was a unique feature that wasn't present in other dioceses, you know, and we were, quote unquote, running that with some real figurehead sisters in there that if I go to St. Edward's in elementary, Sister Rosemary O'Brien is always remembered because she took over everyone's life, but was perfect. She was just a love. Now, when you get to the high school question, we had the high school on the Villa grounds because of the tragedy of those early years. And that high school had expanded in interest, and that high school had grown to a perfection that was hard to beat. So that high school went along very well, except the cost to the mother house would knock you out of the ballpark. Right. And so in time we had to close it because no one could have afforded, as they know today, when they pay these tuitions, that no one could have afforded to go there. So that closure was a very painful end of a wonderful era in our lives. The development of Magnificat High School, in some senses to replace Lourdes Academy, was a major piece in our life, a desire. Magnificat is a very attractive, successful, all-girls school. That's a delight to my heart, even though I love the co-ed and the management that we've gotten into. Like we've always been part of Mount Marie was ours and then became diocesan, but Mount Marie was certainly all girls. And then when it became a broader question with the diocese, it became a co-ed school, which was right and perfect. So it fits where it fits, and it helps where it helps in terms of what your educational goals are. I think we've always had the highest educational goals that I've known. I had the privilege of being assistant superintendent in the Pittsburgh Diocese, and I had the job, so to speak, of evaluating the quality. Everything was good in Pittsburgh, but when I looked at the Villa, Mount Marie, and Magnificat, and the Lourdes history. And I myself came out of the Lourdes history. So that feeling of, wow, did I ever receive a lot? And I knew that. So I see that qualities there. But more than that, I think there's a reason why people have always chosen Catholic education and then stopped choosing it. And it was certainly because there was inherent in that education of spirituality that people wanted for their children and were taught by their heritage. You should continue to contain yourself within Catholicism. That's not true today. As we know, it's a different time in which the search for my own identity is the biggest thing. And that happens too in the Catholic school for the good. That identity could well be the quality of what's there, but it's not the only identity.
Well, Sister, we've got about 3 minutes left of our middle segment. So we know that the Humility of Mary Sisters also are involved in health care. Tell us very briefly about that ministry.
Well, the health care of St. E's, St. Joseph's in Warren, and also St. Joe's in Lorraine are all a unique history, and that is the bishop's command. And so when the bishop would say, you'd say, how high? And when that happened, of course, St. Elizabeth's began, and St. Elizabeth's became a startlingly marvelous entity and a developmental one today that is exciting. However, I would never deny that in what I know of the history and what I've read of the history and what I feel, the burden that was put on the community to make that happen financially and personally was overwhelming. Now, St. E's is important to mention because when I mentioned Monsignor Murphy and the house, it's interesting, his grandfather was the co-founder of St. Elizabeth with our Mother Genevieve. And that was a natural thing. The doctors wanted a doctor in there. So he built the house down the street from the house that was bought for St. Elizabeth's so that he could walk up and watch and direct and control when he had to control. And so that begot St. Elizabeth's, which was really loved by the people and needed, and the support, the interest, overwhelming, just overwhelming. Not so with St. Joe's. St. Joe's was harder, and Catholicism was a much harder piece in Warren. And so you had to go there knowing the constraints. But St. Joseph's, because of that pressure, to me was one of those jewels in that it was a smaller hospital, everybody knew everyone else, and there was a lot of wonderful relationship there. That's not to pass by the years that someone like Sister Consolata made those relationships happen, but much harder in a big place, much harder.
We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but we need to take another break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. After the Catholics of Warren stopped meeting in their homes and organized a structured parish, they used a former Episcopalian church for their worship. St. Mary's Mission was established in 1837, yet the first resident pastor did not come to the parish until 1868. Other parishes quickly grew up in Trumbull County, including St. Stephen Niles in 1853, St. Patrick Hubbard in 1869, St. Vincent de Paul Vienna in 1871, now called St. Thomas the Apostle, and St. Rose Gerard in 1892. The other 15 parishes in the county were established after the turn of the 20th century. Congratulations, Catholic Diocese, for celebrating 75 years with pride in the past and faith in the future. Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Sister Anne McManamon. You know, Sister, you shared with us many of the ministries, in particular education and healthcare, that the Humility of Mary Sisters have been involved with over these many years. One ministry that you're intimately involved with that we'd like to talk about, which is really a celebration, I think, of our diocesan church being involved in that, is the Dorothy Day House. Tell us about that.
Good question. It's perfect. Dorothy Day House is 9 years old as of November of this year, and so we're looking forward to some type of an appropriate celebration of 10 years. The Dorothy Day House reflects who Dorothy Day is and whether or not there will be a canonization. Do not know that, but there is a desire split down the middle, because her feeling always was that Don't Call Me a Saint, a famous book that she has about herself, is an indication of her belief that we're all called to sanctity, and that if you place one person on a pedestal, you're going to lose a lot of other people. You're going to be in trouble. Dorothy Day House is about one of 240 right now, and they spread over the United States, and they're also in Europe. The Dorothy Day House always has two major goals. One is a type of charity or love that compares with nothing else you've ever known. And so, how do you do that? In our case, that's a meal in the evening. We're the only ones in the diocese or in the Youngstown area that offers dinner at night. We're the only ones who use silver that gets stolen every other week. We're the only ones that uses china and glasses. And that's very elevating. And that's very much a sign of your trust and your love, even though I kill them when they steal them. But still, it is a beautiful thing. So we do have that meal at night, and we do, this time of the month, toward the end of the month, we would be usually taking in about 100. The other side of the dinner is the garden, and that was always a belief on Peter Morin's part, as well as Dorothy's, that if you didn't have a farm or a garden, and the person who was in trouble didn't get down and put their hands in the dirt, they wouldn't begin to know what real life is about. So that is ours too. We have a beautiful garden, and we're right on Belmont Avenue, which is the center of downtown. No matter how much is developed down there, it's good that we're sitting in the middle of the undeveloped. And that's true. That's a truth no matter which way. The other thing I would have to say about a Dorothy Day House that's absolutely essential is, if you have great love and you have a sense of hospitality that overwhelms, you'll get a lot of people in there, but a lot of people that have terrible needs, a terrible variety of needs. And so it's your job, if you're organizing and pulling a Dorothy Day together, to make sure that the other side of the coin is, are you dealing with some unmet injustice that's in your area or in the world? One of the things we deal with regularly is the injustice that prevails between the lawmakers in our city and the people sitting in front of us at dinner. And so trying to establish a love relationship is really a toughie, but we work at it. And one of the things is begging for the police to drive through our lot and go out the other driveway. You don't even have to stop, just do it. But more importantly, like, we put on a big picnic every year, and we're doing that, I think, the 16th or 17th of August. And we invite all of the city lawmakers, but most importantly, the police in the city. Getting them to sit down is a hard job. Sure. But if they sit down and break bread, they are halfway there with all of our people. And once in a while, you've got some people that do that. But I have a question as to how that happens. What injustices do we try to deal with? As a house, we've worked very hard for 3 years on trafficking. And we have at least 9 people prepared through the Cleveland office to go out and really present to people what trafficking really is, and why are we number 4 in the United States for trafficking? How is this happening? And I find when I go out that people are shocked. They know it exists, they know it's south of the border, but they do not believe that it's so rampant right here in Youngstown or Cleveland. We did a prayer day a few weeks ago, and we did it every half hour straight through the night to the nighttime. And the first person that came in, I rejoiced because I know her well, and I didn't think she'd ever come. But she came in right away at a few minutes before 9 and sat down. We had a really nice section all fixed up. And she said to me, I said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here." And she said back to me, "You're the reason I'm here." And she started to weep, and she cried and cried. And so her life has been the worst of the trafficking type syndrome. And how do you get out of it? No, not easy. Not easy ever. And how much companionship and consolation do you need? We need it badly in Youngstown. If we're number 4, there must be something big happening here that we need to deal with. So that's a snippet of the way things are. And as far as what I experience with Dorothy today, I think when I look at this diocese, I think of a diocese that's always been known for extraordinary strength and uniqueness in its approach. And I go back to even buying the steel mills. And, you know, we're going to work with this problem. We're going to deal with it. I think that's why we don't have a Dorothy Day House, because it would be the thing to do, buy those steel mills. But what I find now is that the interest on the part of the priests of the diocese, on the part of the parishes, on the part of the people in general is overwhelming. They love coming. They love being servers. There aren't enough making dinners, but there are some very beautiful restaurants in the Youngstown area that donate. 2 in particular that donate 1 meal a month, 12 meals a year, that very costly for them personally. But they do it out of real devotion and love to the poor. Come and do haircuts and come and, you know, music, and it's a great place to be. It's hard, but it's great.
Well, Sister, it's unfortunate that we're end of our discussion. We love having you on our show. We thank you for the input that you've shared with us about the humility of Mary Sisters, but also about the wonderful work that you're doing and your folks are doing at Dorothy Day House. Please know of our prayers, our best wishes, and we look forward to celebrating the 10th anniversary of Dorothy Day House here in the Diocese of Youngstown with you.
Thanks, Father, very much.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Korda.